The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly above, its crystalline walls catching the light of 1,000 stars. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their ornate floating chairs, their alien forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. At the center of it all, a small figure stood alone on the judgment platform. Zara's silver skin gleamed under the harsh lights, her pointed ears twitching as whispers filled the chamber. Half human, half Vexen, she belonged nowhere. Her mother had been a respected Vexen diplomat, her father a human explorer who had broken the oldest law of the galaxy: no mixing of species. The result stood before them now, a living reminder of forbidden love. "The creature before us represents everything wrong with the galaxy," boomed Counselor Thex, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. His blue skin rippled with disgust as he spoke. "She carries the taint of humanity, the most dangerous species in known space." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The humans had been contained to their solar system for good reason. They were unpredictable, violent, and worst of all, they corrupted everything they touched. The proof stood before them. A half-breed abomination that shouldn't exist. Zara kept her chin high, though her heart hammered in her chest. She had known this day would come. Since her mother's death 3 years ago, she had been living on borrowed time. The Vexen Council had tolerated her presence only because of her mother's sacrifice during the Zephyrian War. But tolerance had its limits. "The hybrid has no place among civilized species," continued Counselor Thex. "Her very existence threatens the purity of our genetic lines. Who knows what diseases, what corruptions she might spread?" A tall, elegant Zephyrian stood, her crystal-like skin chiming softly as she moved. "I must agree with Counselor Thex. The human genetic code is notoriously unstable. We've seen what happens when it mingles with other species. The results are always unfortunate." Zara's fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream, to tell them about her mother's bravery, about how she had saved an entire colony from Zephyrian raiders. She wanted to remind them that her grades at the academy were higher than most purebloods. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Fear and prejudice had already decided her fate. The voting began without ceremony. One by one, the representatives cast their judgment. Red lights filled the chamber like drops of blood against the starry backdrop. Guilty, banished, exiled to the dead zones beyond civilized space. Only 3 votes glowed blue in her favor, all from species that had been helped by her mother. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. "By the authority of the Galactic Council," Counselor Thex announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, "the half-breed known as Zara Valdris is hereby banished from all civilized space. She will be transported to the Omega Sector, where she will remain for the rest of her natural life. No ship will aid her, no world will shelter her, no being will trade with her." The words hit Zara like physical blows. The Omega Sector was a graveyard of dead stars and broken worlds, home to pirates, slavers, and worse. It was where the galaxy sent its garbage, both living and dead. Guards approached from all sides, their energy weapons humming softly. Zara didn't resist as they placed the neural collar around her neck. The device would prevent her from using any technology above basic survival level. She couldn't pilot a ship, couldn't send communications, couldn't even use advanced medical equipment. It was a death sentence disguised as mercy. As they led her away, Zara caught sight of her reflection in the polished floor. Her silver skin and pointed ears marked her as Vexen, but her green eyes and dark hair were purely human. She was a bridge between 2 worlds, and both had rejected her. The transport ship was little more than a metal box with engines. Zara was the only passenger, her guards speaking in hushed tones about the upcoming journey. She pressed her face to the small porthole and watched as the council station grew smaller behind them. For 3 days they traveled through hyperspace, each jump taking them further from civilization. The guards barely spoke to her, treating her like a dangerous animal that might bite if provoked. She ate the nutritional paste they provided and slept on the hard metal bench, dreaming of her mother's warm embrace and her father's stories of Earth. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace, Zara's heart sank. The Omega Sector was worse than she had imagined. Dead stars cast sickly light on barren worlds, and the space between was filled with debris from countless wars and disasters. This would be her home now, this graveyard at the edge of everything. The transport ship landed on a small asteroid that had been hollowed out into a basic station. The air was breathable but stale, recycled countless times through failing systems. A few dozen beings called this place home. Outcasts, criminals, and others the galaxy had forgotten. "This is as far as we go," the guard captain announced, his voice muffled by his helmet. "You're on your own now, hybrid." They left her standing on the docking platform with nothing but the clothes on her back and the neural collar around her neck. The transport ship lifted off immediately, eager to return to civilized space. Zara watched until it disappeared into the darkness, taking with it her last connection to the life she had known. The station was barely functional. Lights flickered in the corridors and the gravity generators hummed with the strain of keeping everyone's feet on the floor. The other inhabitants avoided her, recognizing the neural collar as a mark of the truly unwanted. Even here among the galaxy's refuse, she was alone. Zara found an empty storage room and made it her home. The metal walls were cold against her skin, but it was better than sleeping in the corridors. She had no idea how she would survive in this place, how she would find food or water or purpose. The council had sent her here to die slowly, forgotten by the galaxy that had created her. But as she lay on the hard floor, staring up at the rusted ceiling, Zara made herself a promise. She would survive. She would prove that her mixed blood was a strength, not a weakness. And someday, somehow, she would show the galaxy that they had been wrong about humans, about her, about everything. The stars outside her tiny window offered no comfort, but they did offer something else. Hope. Somewhere out there beyond the reach of the council's laws, her father's people waited. If she could find them, if she could prove herself worthy, maybe she could find a place where being different wasn't a crime. For now, though she was alone in the darkness, carrying the hopes and failures of two species in her hybrid heart. 6 months in the Omega sector had taught Zara that survival meant accepting help from the most unlikely sources. The neural collar around her neck still prevented her from using advanced technology, but it couldn't stop her from learning. And learn she had. The first lesson came from Grex, a one-armed Taurian who ran the station's water recycling plant. His species was known for their 4 powerful arms and their skill with machinery, but a mining accident had cost him 3 limbs and his place in civilized society. When Zara approached him, desperate for work, he had laughed bitterly. "What can a broken hybrid do that I can't do better with one arm?" He had growled, his tusks yellowed with age. But desperation made Zara creative. The neural collar prevented her from operating the advanced computer systems, but it couldn't stop her from crawling through the narrow maintenance shafts that Grex could no longer reach. While he guided her with hand signals and gruff instructions, she cleared blockages and replaced worn parts in spaces too small for anyone else. "You're tougher than you look, little hybrid," Grex had admitted after her first week. "Your human side gives you flexibility. Your Vexen side gives you endurance. Maybe being mixed isn't such a curse after all." The second lesson came from hunger. The station's food supplies were limited and expensive, controlled by a gang of saurian smugglers who charged whatever they wanted. Zara quickly learned that she couldn't afford to eat regularly, but her hybrid metabolism was different from purebloods. She could go longer without food, and when she did eat, her body processed it more efficiently than either humans or Vexens alone. This discovery led her to the station's hydroponics bay, a forgotten section that had been abandoned years ago when the previous operator died. The equipment was old and broken, but the basic systems were still intact. Zara spent weeks teaching herself how to repair the ancient machines, using skills she had learned from watching her mother work in the academy gardens. "Impossible," muttered Cass, a Zephyrian exile who had been watching her work. His crystal skin was cracked and dull, a sign of prolonged exposure to the sector's radiation. "Those plants need specific mineral combinations. The soil processors haven't worked in decades." But Zara had found another way. Her human ingenuity, combined with Vexen patience, had led her to create a makeshift filtration system using scavenged parts. It wasn't elegant or efficient, but it worked. Soon, fresh vegetables were growing in the abandoned bay, providing nutrition that the processed food rations couldn't match. Word spread quickly through the station. The broken hybrid was growing real food. Within days, beings who had ignored her before were offering to trade for fresh produce. Zara found herself with more resources than she had ever imagined possible in this forgotten corner of space. But success brought its own dangers. The Saurian, gang that controlled the food trade, didn't appreciate competition. Their leader, Voss, was a massive creature with scarred hide and cybernetic implants replacing half his face. He cornered Zara in the hydroponics bay one evening, his claws scraping against the metal walls. "You're cutting into my profits, hybrid," he hissed, his artificial eye glowing red in the dim light. "I think it's time you learned your place." Zara's Vexen training had included basic combat skills, but she was no match for a creature 3 times her size with military-grade implants. Voss's claws raked across her arm, leaving deep gashes that bled silver blue. She stumbled backward, hitting the water recycling tanks. "Please," she gasped, pressing her hand against the wound. "I'm just trying to survive. There's enough for everyone." Voss laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Survival is earned, little hybrid, and you haven't earned yours." He raised his claws for the killing blow, but it never came. A figure stepped out of the shadows behind him, Grex, wielding a plasma cutter in his one good hand. The beam sliced cleanly through Voss's cybernetic arm, sending sparks flying across the room. "Touch her again and I'll cut off more than your arm," Grex snarled, his tusks gleaming in the plasma light. Other figures emerged from the darkness. Kess, an old Andorian mechanic named Teak, even some of the younger beings who had been trading for Zara's vegetables. They had formed a circle around Voss, their improvised weapons ready. "You want to hurt her, you go through all of us," Kess declared, his crystal skin ringing like a bell as he moved. Voss looked around at the assembled group, his remaining eye calculating the odds. For the first time since arriving at the station, Zara felt something she had almost forgotten: the warmth of belonging. These broken, forgotten beings had chosen to stand with her. "This isn't over," Voss growled, clutching his severed arm. His gang retreated toward the docking bay, but Zara knew they would return with reinforcements. "We need to be ready for them," Grex said, examining Zara's wounds. "They won't let this slide." Over the following weeks, Zara's unlikely allies helped her prepare. They couldn't leave the station. None of them had working ships or the resources to repair them, but they could make the station defensible. Zara's knowledge of the maintenance shafts proved invaluable, allowing them to set up ambush points and escape routes throughout the facility. The attack came at night, when most of the station's inhabitants were asleep. Voss had hired mercenaries from other parts of the sector, desperate beings with functional weapons and nothing to lose. They cut through the station's outer hull and poured into the corridors expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they found a nightmare of improvised traps and coordinated resistance. Zara moved through the maintenance shafts like a ghost, appearing behind enemy positions to disable their equipment before vanishing again. Her hybrid nature gave her advantages that purebloods couldn't match. She could fit through spaces too small for most beings, and her mixed genetics made her harder to track with standard sensors. The battle raged for hours, but in the end, the defenders held. Voss's mercenaries retreated to their ships, carrying their wounded and leaving their dead behind. The Saurian himself had vanished during the fighting, presumably fleeing to another part of the sector. As dawn broke through the station's windows, Zara stood in the hydroponics bay, surrounded by her friends and protectors. Her vegetables had been damaged in the fighting, but most could be saved. More importantly, something new had grown in the station, a community united by shared struggle rather than divided by species or origin. "You did something I didn't think was possible," Grex said, his voice quiet with wonder. "You brought us together, made us care about something besides our own survival." Zara looked around at the faces surrounding her, scarred, broken beings who had been cast out by the galaxy. But in their eyes she saw something that had been missing from the council chambers: acceptance. They didn't care about her mixed blood or her neural collar. They cared about what she had done, not what she was. "We're stronger together," she said simply. "The galaxy threw us away, but that doesn't mean we're worthless. Maybe it just means we can build something better out here." The station's intercom crackled to life, startling everyone. Long-range communications were supposed to be impossible with their damaged equipment, but somehow a signal was getting through. The voice that emerged was distorted but clearly human, the first human voice Zara had heard since her childhood. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the UEF vessel Defiant, calling any station in the Omega sector. We are conducting rescue operations for displaced persons. Is anyone receiving this transmission? Zara's heart stopped. Humans. Her father's people had finally come to the Omega sector. The question was, were they here as friends or conquerors? And more importantly, would they see her as one of their own, or just another alien hybrid to be avoided? The transmission repeated, echoing through the station's corridors like a promise or a threat. Everything Zara had built here hung in the balance. The humans had arrived, but what that meant for her future remained terrifyingly unclear. The human ship appeared on their sensors like a ghost materializing from the void. Zara pressed her face against the observation deck's cracked viewport, watching as the vessel approached their asteroid station. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, sleek and predatory, painted in dark gray with bright blue markings along its hull. The letters UEF Defiant were visible even at this distance. "It's beautiful," whispered Kess, his crystal skin chiming softly with nervousness. But terrifying. The other station inhabitants had gathered to watch the approach. Fear and hope warred in their expressions. Humans were legendary throughout the galaxy. Stories of their violence and unpredictability had spread far beyond their quarantined solar system. But they were also known for their technology and their strange tendency to help those in need. Zara's neural collar felt heavier than usual as she watched her father's people approach. She had dreamed of this moment for months, imagining what it would be like to meet others who shared her human heritage. But now that it was happening, terror filled her heart. What if they rejected her too? What if her alien blood made her as unwelcome among humans as her human blood had made her among the council races? "Asteroid station," came the voice over their communication system, clearer now that the ship was closer. "This is Captain Marcus Chen. We're reading multiple life signs on your station. Are you in need of assistance?" Grex looked at Zara with his one good eye. "You should answer them. You're the only one here with human blood." Zara's hand trembled as she reached for the communication controls. The neural collar prevented her from operating most advanced systems, but basic communications were still possible. She took a deep breath and pressed the transmit button. "Captain Chen, this is Zara Valdris aboard Omega Station 7. We're survivors. Exiles from Council space." Her voice cracked slightly. "Most of us have nowhere else to go." There was a long pause before the captain responded. When he did, his voice was gentler than before. "Copy that, Zara. We're going to dock with your station. Don't be alarmed by our appearance. We're here to help, not harm." The docking process was smooth and professional. The human ship's airlock sealed with their ancient docking port, as if they had been designed for each other. Zara found herself standing at the front of the group that had gathered to greet their visitors, her hybrid heritage making her the natural spokesperson despite her fears. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and Zara got her first look at actual humans. 3 figures stepped through the threshold, wearing form-fitting uniforms in the same blue and gray as their ship. They moved with a confidence that reminded Zara of her father's stories, but their faces were kind rather than threatening. Captain Chen was a middle-aged man with graying hair and warm brown eyes. He took in the assembled beings with a quick glance, his expression showing concern rather than disgust. Beside him stood a woman with short red hair and sergeant stripes, and a younger man who couldn't have been much older than Zara herself. "I'm Captain Chen," the leader said, his voice carrying easily through the station's thin air. "This is Sergeant O'Brien and Lieutenant Rodriguez. We're part of the United Earth Federation's First Contact Division." Zara stepped forward, acutely aware of how her silver skin and pointed ears marked her as different. "I'm Zara Valdris. Thank you for coming." The captain's eyes widened slightly as he took in her appearance, but his expression remained warm. "You're human," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Partly, at least. I can see it in your bone structure, your eye color." "Half human," Zara confirmed, touching her neural collar self-consciously. "The Galactic Council exiled me here because of my mixed heritage." Something dark flashed across Captain Chen's face at the mention of the neural collar. "Those bastards," Sergeant O'Brien muttered under her breath, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm. "How long have you been here?" the captain asked, his voice carefully controlled. 8 months, Zara replied. "Most of us have been here longer. This station is where the galaxy sends its unwanted." Lieutenant Rodriguez was scanning the assembled beings with a handheld device. his young face troubled by what he was reading. "Captain, these neural collars, they're not just tracking devices. They're suppressing brain function, preventing the use of advanced technology. This is torture disguised as exile." The captain's jaw tightened. "Can you remove them?" "I'd need to get them back to the ship. Our medical bay has the necessary equipment." The lieutenant's eyes met Zara's. "But I should warn you, the removal process might be painful. These things are designed to be permanent." Zara touched the collar again, feeling the weight of it around her neck. "I don't care about the pain. I'll do whatever it takes." Greg stepped forward, his tusks gleaming in the station's dim light. "What about the rest of us? We're not human. Do you help aliens too?" Captain Chen turned to study the one-armed Taurian. "The Federation's charter is clear. We provide aid to any sentient being in distress, regardless of species. You've been abandoned here by your own governments. That makes you refugees in our book. But the quarantine," Kess said, his crystal skin ringing with uncertainty. "Humans aren't supposed to leave their solar system. The Council will declare war if they find out you're here." A grim smile crossed the captain's face. "The Council's quarantine was never our idea. It was their attempt to contain what they saw as a threat. But we've been watching, learning, preparing. The galaxy is about to discover that humans don't stay contained for long." Sergeant O'Brien gestured toward the docking port. "We have room for about 50 beings on the Defiant. There's a new colony being established in the Centauri system, well outside Council space. You'd be free there, no collars, no exile." The offer sent a shock through the assembled beings. Freedom, real freedom, was something most of them had given up hope of ever seeing again. But Zara found herself hesitating. "What about the others?" she asked. "There are more stations like this one scattered throughout the Omega sector. More exiles, more forgotten beings." Captain Chen studied her for a long moment. "You're thinking like a human," he said finally. "Most species would take the rescue and run. But humans, we have this annoying habit of trying to save everyone." "It's not just humans," Zara said, looking back at Grex and the others who had stood with her against Voss. "These beings protected me when they didn't have to. They built something here, something worth preserving." "She's right," Grex rumbled. "We're stronger together than we ever were apart. If you can give us the tools, we can help rescue the others ourselves." The captain exchanged glances with his officers. "That's not exactly standard procedure. But then again, nothing about this situation is standard." He turned back to Zara. "What did you have in mind?" Zara felt her heart racing as the plan formed in her mind. "The station has good bones but failing systems. If you could help us repair it, upgrade it, we could turn this place into a real rescue center, a place where the galaxy's outcasts could come for help instead of just waiting to die." "A human-style operation," Sergeant O'Brien said with approval. "Messy, complicated, and guaranteed to make enemies." "I like it." Lieutenant Rodriguez was already taking readings of the station's infrastructure. "The basic structure is sound. With our fabrication equipment, we could have this place fully operational in a few weeks. Add some defensive systems, better life support, maybe a small shipyard. You're talking about establishing a permanent human presence in the Omega sector," Captain Chen said slowly. "That's going to attract attention from the Council. They won't just ignore this." Zara lifted her chin, feeling more confident than she had since her exile began. "Let them come. They threw us away because they thought we were weak, worthless. Maybe it's time to show them what the galaxy's rejects can accomplish when they work together." The captain smiled, and Zara saw in his expression the same determination she remembered from her father's stories. "You know what? You're absolutely right. The Council wants to treat humans like a disease? Fine. Let's show them how fast we can spread." He held out his hand to Zara in the ancient human gesture of agreement. She took it without hesitation, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. For the first time since her exile, she felt truly connected to her human heritage. "Welcome to the rebellion," Captain Chen said. "It's going to be one hell of a ride." Around them, the station's inhabitants began to stir with new hope. The age of exile was ending, and the age of defiance was about to begin. Zara looked around at the faces surrounding her, human, alien, and hybrid alike, and knew that everything was about to change. The galaxy had tried to break them by casting them into darkness. Instead, they had forged themselves into something new, something stronger. And now they were ready to light their own fire in the void. 3 weeks had transformed Omega Station 7 from a dying outpost into something resembling hope. The human engineering teams worked alongside the exiled beings with an efficiency that amazed everyone involved. Zara watched from the new observation deck as another group of refugees arrived, their battered transport ship limping toward the station's expanded docking bays. The neural collar was gone from her neck, removed by Lieutenant Rodriguez in a procedure that had left her unconscious for 2 days. The freedom was intoxicating. She could access computer systems again, pilot vehicles, even help with the advanced repairs that were transforming their home. But more than the technological freedom, she treasured the sense of belonging that had grown between the humans and the exiles. "Another 17 beings on this transport," reported Kess, his crystal skin bright with purpose as he monitored the communication channels. 3 different species, all bearing Council exile marks. Captain Chen nodded from his position at the main control panel. In 3 weeks, he had become as much a fixture on the station as any of the original inhabitants. "Any pursuit?" "Negative," came Sergeant O'Brien's voice from the defense grid she had established around the station. "Long-range sensors are clear, but that won't last forever." Zara knew she was right. Word was spreading through the Omega sector about the station's transformation. Every day brought more refugees, but it also increased the chances that the Council would eventually notice the unusual activity in their dumping ground. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from his engineering station, "I'm reading some interesting energy signatures from the incoming transport. I think they've got wounded aboard." Dr. Sarah Kim, the Defiant's chief medical officer, was already moving toward the medical bay they had established in what used to be a storage compartment. "Prep the surgical suite. If they made it this far wounded, they're either very tough or very desperate." The transport ship docked with the same smooth precision that had become standard since the humans had upgraded the station's systems. Zara joined the welcoming committee that had formed naturally around these arrivals. It helped newcomers adjust faster when they saw that beings like themselves had not only survived here, but thrived. The airlock opened to reveal something that made even Zara's hybrid heart skip a beat. The beings stumbling through were clearly refugees, their clothes torn and their movements pained. But leading them was a figure she recognized from her academy days, Commander Vethtar of the Hegemony Navy, a Saurian officer who had once been considered one of the finest military minds in the galaxy. "Commander Vethtar." Zara stepped forward, unable to hide her shock. "What happened to you?" The proud Saurian's scales were dull with exhaustion and pain, and a crude bandage covered where his left eye should have been. But his remaining eye blazed with intelligence and determination. "The Council happened," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "They declared my family's military service meaningless when I questioned their treatment of human prisoners." Behind him, Zara could see the other refugees, a mix of species but all bearing the telltale signs of recent exile. These weren't the broken beings who usually found their way to the station. These were people who had held positions of authority, who had been stripped of everything for daring to speak against the Council's policies. "Human prisoners?" Captain Chen's voice cut through the welcoming chatter, sharp with concern. Commander Vethtar turned his attention to the human officer, his military bearing reasserting itself despite his wounds. "Captain Chen, I presume. Your reputation precedes you, even in Council space." He paused, studying the captain's face. "Yes, human prisoners. 3 ships that strayed too close to Council territory. The crews were captured rather than killed, but the conditions..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone present could imagine what the Council considered appropriate treatment for captured humans. "Where are they being held?" Sergeant O'Brien had appeared beside the captain, her expression grim. "The Tartarus facility in the Proxima Nebula," Vethtar replied. "Maximum security prison, designed for the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. The humans are being held in isolation, probably as test subjects." Zara felt her blood run cold. Tartarus was legendary throughout the galaxy, a place where beings were sent to disappear. No one had ever escaped from its quantum-locked cells and automated defense systems. "That's a fortress, not a prison," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, his young face pale. "The nebula disrupts sensors and communications. Even if we could get close, the facility has enough firepower to destroy a fleet." "Which is exactly why no one would expect a rescue attempt," Captain Chen said quietly. Around him, the humans were exchanging glances that Zara had learned to recognize. They were already planning something impossible. Commander Vethtar straightened despite his wounds. "Captain, I know that facility's defense is better than anyone. I helped design them. Back when I believed the Council's propaganda about protecting the galaxy. If you're seriously considering a rescue mission, you'll need someone who knows the layout. You'd help us rescue humans? Grex asked, his one good arm gesturing in disbelief. After everything the Council has told the galaxy about my species? The Council lied, Vethtar said simply. About humans, about the necessity of exile, about everything. I've seen their files, their real plans. They don't want to protect the galaxy from humans. They want to control it without human interference. Dr. Kim had finished her examination of the new arrivals and joined the group gathering around Vethtar. Commander, you're suffering from radiation poisoning and severe malnutrition. You need medical attention, not more stress. I'll heal, the Saurian replied firmly. But those prisoners won't survive much longer in Tartarus. If we're going to act, it has to be soon. Zara found herself speaking before she fully realized what she was saying. We'll need more than just a rescue mission. We'll need a statement that the galaxy can't ignore. All eyes turned to her, and she felt the weight of their attention, but she also felt the certainty of her human heritage mixing with her Vexan patience to create something new. Think about it, she continued. Every species in the galaxy has been told that humans are contained, controlled, no longer a threat. But here we are, humans and exiles working together, building something the Council never thought possible. A successful prison break wouldn't just free those prisoners, it would prove that the Council's power isn't absolute. Captain Chen was nodding slowly. A propaganda victory as much as a military one. Show the galaxy that humans don't abandon their own, and that we're willing to work with anyone who shares our values. It would also paint a target on this station, the size of a small moon, Sergeant O'Brien pointed out. The Council would have to respond and respond hard. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for them, Zara said. She looked around at the assembled beings. Human and alien, soldier and exile, predator and prey, all united by a common cause. We've already proven that the galaxy's rejects can build something worth protecting. Now let's prove they can fight for it too. The planning began immediately. Commander Vethtar provided detailed schematics of Tartarus, while the humans outlined their available resources. Dr. Kim worked on treatments that would allow the Saurian to participate despite his injuries. Lieutenant Rodriguez calculated hyperspace routes that would avoid Council patrols. But it was Grex who provided the key insight. You're thinking like military officers, he said, his tusks gleaming in the station's improved lighting. All frontal assaults and tactical precision. But this is the Omega Sector. We don't fight fair here. What do you have in mind? Captain Chen asked. The one-armed Taurian's grin was positively predatory. Voss and his mercenaries are still operating in this sector. They've got ships, weapons, and absolutely no loyalty to the Council. What if we convince them to help us? They tried to kill us a month ago, Kess pointed out, his crystal skin chiming with nervous energy. That was business, Grex replied. This would be business too, just more profitable. Pirates understand profit better than politics. Zara felt a smile spreading across her face as the audacious plan took shape in her mind. A combined human exile pirate assault on the galaxy's most secure prison. The Council will never see it coming. Because it's completely insane, Sergeant O'Brien muttered, but she was smiling too. Captain Chen stood and looked around at the group that had formed around their improvised planning table. All right, people. We've got 72 hours to plan the impossible. Recruit our enemies and assault a fortress that's never been breached. Just another day in the Omega Sector. As the group dispersed to begin their preparations, Zara felt a hand on her shoulder. Commander Vethtar was looking at her with his remaining eye, his expression thoughtful. You know, he said quietly. When I was young, my instructors taught me that humans were dangerous because they were unpredictable. Now I think they were dangerous because they inspire others to be unpredictable too. Zara looked around at the bustling activity filling the station. Humans and aliens working side by side, planning something that would either change the galaxy or get them all killed. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, she replied. The Saurian's scarred face creased in what might have been a smile. No, he agreed. Perhaps it's exactly what the galaxy needs. The Proxima Nebula stretched before them like a wall of toxic beauty, its swirling gases painted in shades of purple and gold by the radiation of dying stars. Hidden somewhere in that cosmic storm was Tartarus, the Council's most secure prison, and their target. Zara stood on the bridge of the converted freighter Lucky Strike, watching as their unlikely fleet approached the nebula's edge. Captain Chen commanded the Defiant on their starboard side, while Voss's pirate vessel Blood Prophet held position to port. 3 ships, carrying beings who had been enemies just days ago, united now by desperation and audacity. The negotiations with Voss had been tenser than the actual planning of the assault. The scarred Saurian pirate had listened to their proposal with obvious disbelief, his remaining natural eye studying each member of their delegation as if calculating their individual worth on the black market. "You want me to assault Tartarus?" he had said finally, his cybernetic implants whirring softly. "The most heavily defended facility in Council space. To rescue humans I don't care about. For payment you don't actually have." "The payment is freedom," Zara had replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Freedom from Council authority. Freedom to operate without looking over your shoulder. Freedom to trade with anyone willing to pay." "Pretty words," Voss had growled. "But I deal in concrete assets, not abstract concepts." It was Commander Vethtar who had sealed the deal, despite his injuries making him appear weak to the pirate's eyes. "The Council's files on your operations," he had said quietly. "Location of your hidden bases, names of your contacts, records of your illegal modifications. All of it will be transmitted to their enforcement division if this rescue fails." The threat had hung in the air like poison gas, until Voss's artificial eye had fixed on the former council officer. "You're saying I'm dead either way?" "I'm saying you have a chance to choose how you die," Vethtar had replied. "Fighting for something that matters or running until they finally catch you." Now as they approached the nebula, Zara wondered if they had made the right choice trusting the pirate. Their plan depended on precise timing and coordination between 3 very different crews with conflicting motivations. "Entering the nebula in 30 seconds, reported Teak from the helm station. The old Andorian had volunteered to pilot their ship despite having only basic training. "Communications will be limited once we're inside." Captain Chen's voice crackled over their short-range comm system. "Remember, people, we get one shot at this. Voss goes in first to disable the outer defenses, we follow to breach the main facility, and Strike Team Alpha extracts the prisoners while the rest of us keep the guards busy. Assuming Voss doesn't decide to cut and run once he's inside," Sergeant O'Brien muttered from her position at the tactical station. Zara checked her equipment one final time. The hybrid nature that had once made her an outcast was now their greatest advantage. She could fit through maintenance shafts too small for most beings, had endurance that exceeded either parent species, and possessed an intuitive understanding of technology that seemed to come from her mixed heritage. "Zara," Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through her personal comm unit. "Are you sure about this? The radiation levels in there are going to be brutal, even with the shielding." She touched the spot where her neural collar had once rested, feeling only smooth skin now. "I'm sure. Those prisoners are in there because they're human. I may be only half human, but that half is enough." The Lucky Strike plunged into the nebula's toxic embrace, and immediately the universe became a swirling maelstrom of color and electromagnetic interference. Their sensors were useless, their communications reduced to whispers. Their navigation dependent entirely on Vethtar's memory of the facility's coordinates. "There," the Saurian commander said, pointing at a darker patch in the purple-gold chaos ahead. "Tartarus." The prison emerged from the nebula like a nightmare made real. It was a massive structure, part asteroid and part artificial construction, bristling with defensive systems and surrounded by automated patrol drones. Energy barriers flickered around its perimeter, creating a cage of deadly light in the nebula's depths. "Blood Prophet is beginning their attack run," Teak reported, his 4 hands dancing across the pilot controls. "Energy signatures suggest they're targeting the drone control network." Voss's ship swept in from below, its weapons carving bright lines through the nebula as it engaged the patrol drones. The pirate might be untrustworthy, but he was undeniably skilled. His modified vessel danced between the automated defenses like a predator among its prey. "Outer perimeter is compromised," came Voss's voice through the static. "You've got maybe 10 minutes before they restore full defensive coverage." The Defiant and Lucky Strike accelerated toward the facility's main docking bays. Captain Chen's ship took point, its military-grade shields absorbing the worst of the defensive fire, while the converted freighter followed in its wake. Boarding teams, prepare for deployment, Captain Chen ordered. Zara, you're with Strike Team Alpha. Get to the detention levels and find those prisoners. The docking bay doors loomed ahead of them, massive barriers designed to keep intruders out and prisoners in. But Commander Vethtar had provided them with override codes that were hopefully still valid. Codes accepted, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported with barely concealed relief. Docking bay doors are opening. They landed with a crash that sent shockwaves through both ships. Emergency lights bathed the docking bay in hellish red as the teams deployed, their mixed human and alien forms spreading out to secure the immediate area. Zara found herself running alongside Grex and 2 human Marines, following the route Vethtar had mapped out for them. The facility's corridors were a maze of gray metal and pulsing energy conduits, designed to confuse and disorient anyone who didn't belong there. Detention-level access is through here, she called, pointing to a maintenance hatch that was barely large enough for her slim form. I'll go first, signal when it's clear. The maintenance shaft was a nightmare of sharp edges and radiation exposure, but Zara's hybrid physiology allowed her to endure what would have crippled most beings. She emerged into the detention level's main corridor to find it surprisingly empty. Too easy, Grex muttered as he squeezed through the hatch behind her. This place should be crawling with guards. They found out why it was empty when they reached the first cell block. The prisoners weren't just isolated. They were unconscious, suspended in stasis fields that kept them alive but unaware. Dozens of beings floated in the energy bubbles, their faces peaceful despite their circumstances. There, one of the Marines said, pointing to a cluster of cells at the far end of the block. Those are humans. Zara's heart clenched as she saw them, 3 figures floating in the stasis fields, their faces slack with artificial sleep. They looked young, probably explorers or traders who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now they were guinea pigs in whatever experiments the Council was conducting. How do we wake them up? Grex asked, studying the complex control panel beside the cells. Very carefully, Zara replied, her fingers dancing over the alien controls. Her mixed heritage seemed to give her an intuitive understanding of the technology, and gradually she began to decipher the stasis system's operation. The first field collapsed with a soft chime, and its occupant, a young woman with short brown hair, tumbled gently to the cell floor. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion replacing the artificial peace of stasis. Where? She began, then focused on Zara's face. Are you human? Half human, Zara replied, already working on the second cell. We're here to get you out. The rescue was proceeding smoothly until the alarms began. Red lights bathed the corridor as sirens wailed throughout the facility, and the sound of running feet echoed from multiple directions. Strike Team Alpha, this is Captain Chen, came the voice through their comm units. We've got company. Council reinforcements just dropped out of hyperspace. You need to move now. The third prisoner, a middle-aged man with engineer's calluses on his hands, was still groggy from stasis as they helped him to his feet. Council forces? He asked, his voice slurred but growing stronger. How many ships? Does it matter? Grex growled, checking his weapons. More than we can fight, or the captain wouldn't sound so worried. They made their way back through the maintenance shafts with agonizing slowness, the rescued prisoners struggling with the after-effects of prolonged stasis. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew closer as facility security finally responded to the breach. The docking bay was chaos when they arrived. Human and alien fighters were engaged in a running battle with prison guards, while the ships prepared for immediate departure. Energy beams crisscrossed the space like deadly fireworks, and the smell of ozone and burned metal filled the air. Everyone aboard, Captain Chen shouted over the din. We're leaving in 60 seconds whether you're ready or not. They made it to the Lucky Strike with seconds to spare, diving through the airlock as the freighter's engines roared to life. Through the viewports, Zara could see the Defiant and Blood Prophet already pulling away from the facility, their hulls scarred by defensive fire but intact. Jump coordinates locked in, Teak reported from the helm. Engaging hyperdrive in 3, 2, 1. The stars streaked into lines as the Council's response came faster and harder than anyone had expected. Within 72 hours of the Tartarus rescue, a massive fleet had assembled at the edge of the Omega sector. 300 ships representing every major species in the Council bore down on the scattered exile stations like an avalanche of righteous fury. Zara stood in the command center. They had hastily constructed in the asteroid belt surrounding Omega Station 7, watching the long-range sensors paint their doom in stark detail. The fleet was enormous. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, all armed with the most advanced weapons the galaxy could produce. Against them, the Exile Alliance could muster perhaps 30 functional combat vessels, most of them converted freighters and pirate ships. They're not here to negotiate, Captain Chen observed grimly, studying the tactical display. His uniform was rumpled from 3 days of constant planning, his eyes red with exhaustion. This is a full extermination fleet. Commander Vethitar, still recovering from his injuries but refusing to stay in the medical bay, manipulated the holographic display with his remaining hand. Standard council doctrine for dealing with galactic threats, he said bitterly. Overwhelming force applied without mercy or hesitation. The rescued prisoners from Tartarus had provided crucial intelligence about council operations, but the news they brought was sobering. The 3 humans, engineer Sarah Torres, navigator Marcus Webb, and xenobiologist Dr. Elena Vasquez, had been captured while conducting humanitarian aid missions in disputed territory. Their treatment in the prison had been worse than anyone imagined. They weren't just holding us, Dr. Vasquez had explained during her debriefing, her hands shaking as she spoke. They were studying us, taking tissue samples, recording our reactions to various stimuli, trying to understand human psychology and physiology. The implications were terrifying. The Council wasn't just trying to contain humanity, they were preparing to destroy it entirely, and they wanted to understand their enemy first. Incoming transmission, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from his communications station. It's on all frequencies, maximum power. They want everyone in the sector to hear this. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the austere features of Supreme Counselor Dextar, the Altarian who led the galactic government. His crystalline blue skin seemed to glow with cold authority as he spoke. Citizens of the galaxy, his voice resonated through the command center. You have witnessed the true nature of the human threat. Despite our containment efforts, these dangerous beings have spread their corruption to the exile zones, turning the galaxy's outcasts into weapons against civilized society. Zara felt her fists clench as the Supreme Counselor continued his propaganda speech. Around her, the faces of humans and aliens alike showed the same mixture of anger and determination. The terrorist attack on Tartarus was merely the beginning, Dextar declared. Human influence has created a cancer in the Omega sector, one that threatens to spread throughout our peaceful galaxy. Therefore, the Council has authorized the complete sterilization of all exile facilities. No quarter will be given, no mercy shown. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in grim silence. The Council's message was clear. They intended to murder every exile in the sector to prevent the spread of what they called human corruption. Well, Grex said finally, his one good arm adjusting the plasma cannon they had mounted on his mechanical replacement. At least we know where we stand. How long until they reach us? Asked Kess, his crystal skin dim with fear but his voice steady. 18 hours at current speed, Captain Chen replied. They're taking their time, probably sweeping each station systematically. Reports were already coming in from the outer systems. The first exile station had been hit 3 hours ago. 200 beings vaporized in seconds by orbital bombardment. No demands for surrender, no attempts at communication, just swift, merciless destruction. We can't fight that fleet head-on, Sergeant O'Brien stated the obvious. Even if we had twice as many ships, their technology advantage is too great. But Zara was studying the tactical display with growing excitement. Her hybrid mind, combining human creativity with Vexen analytical skills, was seeing possibilities that others missed. We don't need to fight the whole fleet, she said suddenly. We just need to make them think twice about the cost of victory. All eyes turned to her as she manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific ships in the Council formation. Look at their deployment. They're arranged in standard battle formation, with the command ships protected in the center. They're expecting conventional resistance. What are you suggesting? Commander Vethtar asked, his remaining eyes sharp with interest. The nebula they just passed through, the one containing the Zarian system, Zara continued, her excitement growing. It's unstable, full of dark matter pockets and gravitational anomalies. If we could trigger a cascade reaction, Captain Chen was already nodding, his tactical mind following her reasoning. A stellar event that would cripple or destroy a significant portion of their fleet. But how do we trigger something like that? We can't, Zara admitted. But they can. If we make them think we're hiding a major base in that system, force them to use heavy bombardment weapons, the energy discharge would destabilize the entire region. Lieutenant Rodriguez finished, his young face pale with the implications. It would be like setting off a bomb in a mine shaft. A lot of exiles would die, Grex pointed out grimly. There are at least 6 stations in that system. Zara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Those stations held thousands of beings. Outcasts and criminals, yes, but also refugees and political prisoners. Sentient lives that would be snuffed out to strike a blow against the Council. They're going to die anyway, she said finally. At least this way their deaths might mean something. The next 12 hours were a frenzy of activity. Every functional ship in the Alliance was pressed into service, not for combat but for evacuation. They managed to rescue about half the beings from the threatened stations, cramming them into cargo holds and passenger compartments never designed for such loads. The rest were volunteers, beings who chose to stay behind and operate the false installations that would draw Council fire, engineers who would maintain the illusion until the very last moment. Heroes who would die to give their people a chance at freedom. Signal from the Council fleet, Rodriguez reported as the final hour approached. They're demanding our surrender. No response, Captain Chen ordered. Let them think we're too afraid to talk. The Council ships entered the Zerion system exactly as predicted, their massive forms casting shadows across the dying stars. Scout ships spread out to investigate the false installations while the main fleet moved into bombardment position. Energy readings are off the charts, reported Dr. Kim from her science station. One concentrated barrage from their main guns will definitely trigger the cascade. Zara watched the tactical display with her heart in her throat. So many variables, so many things that could go wrong. If the Council commanders were more cautious than expected, if they detected the trap before committing to the attack, if the stellar reaction wasn't as powerful as they hoped. Council ships are charging main weapons, O'Brien announced, targeting the primary installation on Zerion Prime. The attack came as a wall of coherent energy that lit up the entire system. Every weapon in the Council arsenal focused on what they believed was the heart of exile resistance. The artificial installations vaporized instantly, along with the brave beings who had stayed to maintain them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to convulse. The dark matter pockets hidden throughout the nebula reacted to the massive energy discharge like gasoline touched by flame. Gravitational waves rippled outward from the bombardment site, catching the Council ships in an invisible web of distorted spacetime. It's working, Lieutenant Rodriguez breathed, his instruments registering the cascade reaction spreading throughout the system. The stellar matter is destabilizing. The nearest star began to collapse under the gravitational distortions, its nuclear fires sputtering like a candle in a hurricane. The energy released by its death throes triggered sympathetic reactions in the neighboring stellar bodies, creating a chain reaction that would consume the entire system. Council ships tried desperately to escape, but their massive forms were too slow to outrun the expanding wave of destruction. Zara watched in awe as vessels that had seemed invincible moments before were caught in gravitational shears that twisted their hulls like paper. 60% of the Council fleet destroyed or disabled, O'Brien reported, her voice filled with professional admiration. The remainder are retreating at maximum speed. The victory came at a terrible cost. The Zerion system was gone, consumed by the artificial stellar collapse. Thousands of beings had died to make it possible, their sacrifice creating a wound in space that would burn for centuries. But their deaths had accomplished something unprecedented. For the first time in galactic history, a Council fleet had been defeated. The exiles had proven that the galaxy's unwanted could strike back against their oppressors. Incoming transmission, Rodriguez announced. It's from the surviving Council ships. 5 years after the Battle of Zerion, Zara stood on the observation deck of New Haven Station, watching as ships from across the galaxy approached their thriving port. The massive structure had grown from the bones of their original exile station into something magnificent. A city in space that housed over 2 million beings from hundreds of different species. The transformation had been gradual but unstoppable. After the Council's humiliating defeat in the Zerion system, Word had spread throughout civilized space that there was a place where the unwanted could find purpose. Political refugees, genetic outcasts, religious minorities, and free thinkers had begun making the dangerous journey to the Omega sector, seeking the freedom that New Haven promised. The Altarian delegation is requesting permission to dock, announced Kess from his position at the traffic control station. His crystal skin was bright with satisfaction as he managed the complex dance of incoming and outgoing vessels. They say they're here to discuss normalized relations. Zara smiled at the irony. 5 years ago, the Altarians had been among the loudest voices calling for her exile. Now they were sending diplomats to negotiate with the alliance she had helped create. Grant them docking clearance, she replied, but standard security protocols. We've learned not to trust council representatives too easily. The political landscape of the galaxy had shifted dramatically since Xerion. The destruction of 60% of the council's fleet had shattered their aura of invincibility, and cracks had begun to appear in their alliance. Several member species had quietly withdrawn their support for the most extreme anti-human policies, while others had begun secret negotiations with the exile territories. Captain Chen approached from the central command area, his hair now more gray than brown, but his step still confident. He had been elected as New Haven's first military commander by popular vote, leading a defense force that included ships from dozens of worlds. The vote is in from the Planetary Congress, he announced, holding a datapad that glowed with official seals. 347 worlds have formally recognized our territorial claims in the Omega sector. We're not exiles anymore, Zara. We're a legitimate government. The recognition had been hard-won. The Alliance of Free Worlds, as they now called themselves, had spent years proving they could govern responsibly, trade fairly, and defend their territory without threatening their neighbors. They had established colonies on 17 worlds, built trade networks that spanned half the galaxy, and most importantly, shown that humans and aliens could work together as equals. Any word from Earth? Zara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Captain Chen's expression grew complicated. The United Earth Federation is still considering our proposal for formal relations. Apparently, there's significant debate about whether to maintain their isolation or risk council retaliation by supporting us openly. It was one of the great ironies of their situation. The Exile Alliance had done more to integrate humans into galactic society than Earth's own government. But the homeworld remained cautious about breaking their quarantine agreement with the Council. They'll come around, Zara said with confidence she didn't entirely feel. Humans don't like being told where they can and can't go. Eventually, they'll get tired of being caged. Commander Vethtar limped into the observation area, his mechanical leg whirring softly with each step. The former council officer had become one of their most valuable advisors, his knowledge of galactic politics proving invaluable during the delicate negotiations that had established their legitimacy. The Zephyrian trade convoy just departed, he reported. Their cargo holds were full of our manufactured goods and they're paying premium prices. It seems our reputation for quality has spread even to the core worlds. The economic success of the Alliance had been almost as surprising as their military victory. Freed from the Council's restrictive trade regulations and species-based discrimination, their mixed communities had proven remarkably innovative. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge had produced technological advances that the established worlds couldn't match. Speaking of reputation, Vethtar continued, we've received another request for assistance. The Kepler colony is facing raids from slavers, and their planetary government is asking for our help. It had become a pattern over the years. Worlds on the galactic frontier, far from Council protection but rich in resources, had begun hiring the Alliance fleet to deal with problems their own forces couldn't handle. It was lucrative work, but more importantly, it gave them opportunities to demonstrate their values in action. What kind of force would we need? Captain Chen asked, already shifting into tactical mode. Nothing major, Vethtar replied. The slavers are using converted cargo ships with basic weapons. A couple of our destroyers should be more than sufficient. Zara nodded her approval. Do it, but make sure the rescue teams include medical staff and counselors. Freed slaves need more than just liberation. They need healing. It was details like this that had earned the Alliance respect throughout the galaxy. They didn't just fight, they helped, they healed, they built. The Council had painted them as terrorists and criminals, but their actions spoke louder than propaganda. Zara, came a voice from behind them. You might want to see this. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached, her face glowing with excitement. The former Tartarus prisoner had become one of their leading researchers, studying the long-term effects of the neural collars that had once bound so many of their people. What is it, Elena? Zara asked, recognizing the look of scientific breakthrough in the other woman's eyes. We've been analyzing the neural pattern data from the collar removal procedures, Elena explained, her words tumbling over each other in her enthusiasm. The neural suppression technology didn't just block access to advanced systems, it was actually inhibiting natural brain development in hybrid individuals. Zara felt her breath catch. What are you saying? I'm saying that the Council's neural collars were crimes against development itself, Elena continued. Your hybrid brain was capable of processing information in ways that neither humans nor Vexans could achieve individually. But the collar was preventing those connections from forming. She handed Zara a datapad, showing complex brain scans and neural pathway diagrams. Look at these readings from before and after your collar removal. Your cognitive capacity has increased by almost 30% over the past 5 years, and it's still growing. The implications were staggering. The Council hadn't just been suppressing their victims' access to technology, they had been crippling their mental development, creating artificial limitations that made resistance seem impossible. How many others? Zara asked quietly. All of them, Elena replied. Every hybrid, every being who received neural suppression has shown similar improvements after removal. The Council created a form of technological lobotomy disguised as exile. Captain Chen was studying the data with growing anger. They didn't just want to get rid of troublemakers. They wanted to make sure those troublemakers could never reach their full potential. Which means, Vethtar added grimly, that every being still wearing a Council neural collar is being artificially diminished. There could be millions of them throughout the galaxy. Zara looked out at the ships surrounding New Haven Station, vessels crewed by beings who had once been written off as failures and outcasts. Now they were traders, explorers, defenders, and innovators. What could they become if the artificial limitations were removed from everyone? We need to get this information to every world in the galaxy, she declared. The Council's been committing genocide by limitation, killing potential instead of lives. That's going to be seen as an act of war, Captain Chen warned. Exposing their methods on that scale will force them to respond. Let them, Zara replied, feeling the fire of her mixed heritage burning in her chest. We've proven we can defend ourselves. Now let's prove we can free others. The decision to release Elena's research publicly changed everything. Within months, the neural collar evidence had spread throughout the galaxy, carried by the trade networks that now connected hundreds of worlds. The revelation that the Council had been systematically diminishing the mental capacity of their enemies sparked outrage even among their traditional allies. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Scientists demanded access to examine their own neural suppression technologies. Political prisoners who had been forgotten in exile, facilities suddenly found themselves the focus of massive rescue efforts. The Council's response was swift and predictable. They declared the Alliance of Free Worlds a terrorist organization and demanded that all legitimate governments cease contact with them immediately. But their authority was no longer absolute. One by one, worlds began to withdraw from Council control. Some joined the Alliance directly, while others declared independence and neutrality. The monolithic galactic government that had ruled for centuries began to fracture along species lines as old grievances surfaced. Standing on the observation deck of New Haven Station, watching as another group of refugees arrived seeking freedom, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them all here. She had been exiled as a hybrid abomination, cast out by a galaxy that feared what she represented. Now she was the elected speaker for